As the narrative continues, it shifts away from concrete explanation and moves deeper into the language of memory, legacy, and unresolved history. The claim of a 39-year-old connection is presented not as a documented fact, but as part of a larger attempt to tie the present moment to an emotionally charged past. It suggests that something significant once occurred within a family context, an event so quietly carried through time that its details were never fully spoken aloud, only indirectly felt through consequences and changed circumstances. Over the years, stories like this tend to grow in complexity when retold, shaped as much by imagination and emotion as by what actually happened. What was once a simple or unclear incident can become, through repetition, a symbol of obligation or unfinished business. In this version of events, the idea of inheritance is less about material possession and more about meaning, how the past is interpreted, and how responsibility is assigned across generations. The debt described is not necessarily financial in a literal sense, but could be understood as a metaphor for unresolved relationships, decisions that carried weight beyond their moment, or promises that were never clearly defined but still felt. When viewed through a grounded lens, the story becomes less about a sudden transfer of wealth and more about how human beings try to connect present identity with ancestral history, often filling in unknown gaps with narrative structure. In doing so, the mind creates continuity where records may not exist, linking emotion to explanation. What remains at the center is not a dramatic revelation of fortune, but the enduring human tendency to search for coherence in family history, to give shape to uncertainty, and to find meaning in the idea that the past still echoes in the present, even when its true details are far less certain than the stories built around it. Someone whose courage still echoes through generations, someone who fought when no one else would stand, someone who made a choice that preserved another man's entire destiny. So hear me closely as I unfold the beginning of this mystery. My child, the story begins on a stormy evening nearly 4 decades ago. Rain poured like the sky was breaking open. Winds roared between the buildings. The streets were nearly empty, except for one man running with everything inside of him. His footsteps splashed through the water. His breath shook. His heart pounded like death itself was chasing him, because in truth, it was. Behind him, 2 shadows moved with ruthless intention. These weren't robbers. They weren't common criminals. They were assassins, sent to end him before sunrise. And tragically, the man running had no idea the betrayal was coming. The attack was orchestrated by someone he trusted deeply, someone who smiled in his face but planned his end behind closed doors. Yes, my child, betrayal was the first seed of this entire story. The man stumbled. His legs felt weak. The weapons behind him gleamed even through the rain. Every path he took led to a dead end. His voice cracked as he cried for help, but every window stayed shut. Every door stayed locked. The world ignored him. The darkness swallowed him. And then, just when he believed his final moment had arrived, he saw someone. A lone figure, standing under a small tin roof, shielding himself from the storm. Not a soldier, not a guard, not someone trained for battle, just a man who happened to be there, a stranger in the night. The desperate man cried out, "Please, help me." His voice broke. His fear was visible. His life hung by a thread. Your heart may ask, why would a stranger get involved? Why risk his life for someone he didn't even know? But this stranger, he did not look away. He did not hesitate. He stepped forward, and that single step changed everything. He faced 2 armed attackers, with nothing but courage in his chest and strength in his soul. Even as rain blinded his eyes, even as the ground grew slippery beneath his feet, even as the weapons flashed toward him, he fought, not for glory, not for reward, but simply because he refused to watch an innocent life be destroyed in front of him. Blow after blow he took. Wounds marked his skin, blood mixed with rain, but he kept standing, and finally, the attackers ran. They fled into the shadows, realizing they could not defeat a man whose courage was greater than their cruelty. The man who had been saved fell to the ground, overwhelmed with gratitude. He tried to speak, but emotion shook his voice. He begged the stranger, "Tell me how I can repay you. Anything. I owe you my life." But the stranger, he simply shook his head and said, "You owe me nothing. Doing what is right is its own reward." My child, that stranger was your father. Yes, it was your father who stepped into the storm, your father who faced death for someone he had never met, your father who refused repayment, your father who walked away quietly, expecting nothing in return. And that moment, that night, that act of bravery became the beginning of a debt that shaped the next 39 years. But here's the mystery. Your father walked away, believing the story was over, but for the man whose life he saved, it was only beginning, because he never forgot the face of the man who rescued him. He never forgot the voice that said, "You owe me nothing." He never forgot the wounds your father carried for him. And as decades passed, while he built his fortune, while he created businesses, while he gathered properties and wealth, one truth followed him like a shadow. He was alive because of your father. Yes, my child, every achievement he gained, every success he tasted, every new day he woke up breathing, was because of that moment. He could never find your father again. He looked everywhere. He searched through records, names, addresses, whispers, but every trail went cold. He married no one. Now, standing at the edge of his later years, he sees this decision as more than a transfer of wealth. To him, it is the completion of a story that never truly ended. Every document he signed, every property placed into your name, every piece of his empire handed over, carries emotional weight far greater than money alone. He believes courage should not vanish unnoticed into history, especially the kind of courage that saves a life expecting nothing in return. In his eyes, you are connected to that moment not because of fortune or destiny in a supernatural sense, but because you are part of the living legacy of a man whose actions changed another person forever. What moves him most is realizing that goodness often survives quietly through generations without anyone recognizing its reach. Your father may never have known the impact of what he did that night, yet his choice created ripples that lasted decades beyond the moment itself. The deeper truth hidden inside this story is not about secret destinies or dramatic revelations the world tried to bury. It is about how acts of integrity can outlive the people who perform them. A single decision made in compassion can shape lives far beyond what anyone imagines at the time. As this man uncovers more about your family, he is not discovering mythical secrets. He is discovering humanity, sacrifice, resilience, and the reminder that real legacies are not built through wealth alone, but through the moments when people choose courage over fear. And perhaps that is the understanding waiting for you now, that the greatest inheritance a person can receive is not money itself, but the responsibility to carry forward the values that made such a gift possible in the first place. The decision this man made to leave you everything, his fortune, his empire, his legacy, didn't begin when he found your name. It started the moment he realized who you were. That realization struck him like lightning. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't hesitation. It was recognition. A recognition that traveled across decades. A recognition of the bloodline that once stood between him and death. The moment he saw your picture, the moment he heard your father's name connected to yours, his hands began to tremble, not out of fear, but out of overwhelming emotion. It felt to him like the past suddenly reached through time and touched his shoulder, like destiny itself whispered, "This is the one," like the circle that refused to close for nearly 40 years, finally sealed itself with your face. And my child, when he confirmed it was truly you, something broke inside of him, something heavy, something he carried silently for decades, a weight he never spoke of, a guilt he never confessed, a promise he never fulfilled, because he always believed that one day, somehow, he would meet the man who saved him again. He would honor him, he would repay him, he would express the gratitude that lived inside him like a burning coal. But time had a different plan. When he learned your father was no longer alive, he felt everything collapse inside him. He felt like he had failed to honor the very person who saved his existence, failed to express the gratitude locked in his heart, failed to repay a debt he believed only your father deserved to receive. But then he realized something powerful. Your father may no longer walk this earth, but you do. And through you, the honor could still be given. Through you, the debt could still be settled. Through you, the story could still be completed. That's when he made the irreversible decision. That's when he rewrote his will. That's when he called his lawyers. That's when he placed your name on every asset he owned. But my child, this story goes deeper, much deeper, because while you heard the part about the storm, the fight, and the rescue, there is a hidden layer that even he didn't know until recently. Your father didn't just save his life that night. He saved his future. He saved his destiny. He saved everything he later became. Because the betrayal wasn't just about killing him. Those men were ordered to take his documents, his ideas, his blueprints, everything he had worked for. If he had died that night, the empire he later built never would have existed. The companies, the land, the investments, the success, the power, none of it would have come into being. Your father didn't just save a man, he saved an entire future. And when this man finally understood that truth, he felt something inside him break open again, this time not with guilt, but with revelation. He realized, if this child is the fruit of that man's bloodline, then this child deserves to receive the harvest of the future that would not exist without him. That's why he didn't give you a portion, he didn't give you a fraction, he didn't give you a symbolic token, he gave you everything. But my child, there is something you are not aware of yet, something hidden beneath the surface, something that took this man days to gather the courage to accept, something he has carried like a secret flame inside his soul. Because when he started searching for your father's identity, when he dug into the past, when he tried to trace that night, something else emerged, something your father never told anyone, something your family never knew, something even he didn't understand until now. Your father wasn't at that road by accident. He wasn't just taking shelter from the rain. He wasn't simply passing by. Your father was there because he was following someone else, someone who tried to harm your family long ago, someone who thought they were clever, someone who believed they could escape, someone connected to the same darkness that tried to kill the man your father saved. Yes, my child, he wasn't at that place by coincidence. He was tracking someone. He was observing someone. As the details surfaced, it became clear that your father's actions were never random acts of bravery. There was intention behind the way he lived, a deep instinct to protect people and pay attention to dangers others ignored. He noticed things most people overlooked, small warning signs, hidden tensions, quiet moments where someone vulnerable needed support before a situation grew worse. The records he left behind painted the picture of a man who carried a strong sense of responsibility toward others, even when nobody asked him to step in. He kept notes, tracked concerns, and followed situations simply because he believed people deserved safety and honesty. Some of the information revealed betrayals, conflicts, and moments where innocent people could have been harmed if no one had intervened. Yet he never spoke publicly about any of it. He did not build his identity around being a hero, and he never used his actions to elevate himself above others. That humility is part of what made his story so powerful to the people who later uncovered it. The man who researched your father's past expected to find a few isolated stories, but instead he discovered a lifetime of quiet sacrifice woven into everyday moments. It changed the way he viewed your family completely. He realized the strength and resilience you carry did not appear out of nowhere. It was part of a legacy built long before you understood it yourself. Sometimes, the people who shape the world most deeply are not the loudest names in history, but the ones whose compassion leaves a lasting mark on individual lives. Your father's choices mattered because they came from genuine character, not from a desire for reward. In the end, the true measure of a person is often found in the good they do when nobody is watching, and your father seemed to understand that better than most people ever will. And when the benefactor understood this truth, he made another decision, one you have not yet heard. He didn't just leave you his wealth, he also left you his archives, sealed documents from your father's past, information your father never had time to complete, secrets tied to that betrayal 39 years ago. And, my child, you need to hear this next part carefully. When he searched deeper, he found out that the person who betrayed him all those years ago, the one who ordered his death, the one who wanted to steal everything he created, that same person once crossed paths with your father too. This shocked him to his core. He realized your father didn't only save his life, your father unknowingly protected him from a man who had planned much greater destruction, financial sabotage, fraud, blame, and ruin. Your father stopped a darkness much bigger than he ever imagined. And now, my child, that darkness has resurfaced, because when the benefactor decided to sign everything over to you, someone from his past found out, someone who had been waiting for him to die so they could claim the inheritance, someone who believed they deserved the wealth, someone connected to the same line of betrayal 39 years ago. When this person discovered your name on the documents, they became furious. Furious that a stranger, you, was chosen. Furious that the legacy they wanted slipped away. Furious that the benefactor honored the bloodline of the man they hated most. And now, my child, this shadow is quietly watching you, not to harm you, but to stop you from receiving what belongs to you, to create confusion, to cause delays, to push obstacles, to block the transfer, to hinder the blessing. But they do not know. Your father's courage lives in you. Your father's covering surrounds you. Your father's legacy moves with you. And the benefactor knew this too. That's why he wrote a letter addressed only to you. A letter he instructed his lawyers to give you at the right time. A letter that reveals why God has allowed this blessing to find you now. In that letter, he wrote, "If this fortune goes to anyone else, it will destroy them. But if it goes to the child of the man who saved me, it will become a blessing, not a curse. My child, you were chosen not only because of what your father did, but because of who you are, your heart, your endurance, your inner strength, even when the world tries to break you, your resilience, even when people underestimate you, your compassion, even when you feel empty." He saw something in you. His spirit recognized something powerful, a quiet greatness, a destiny waiting for its moment, a purpose that has been overshadowed by pain for too long. And now, your season of being overlooked has ended. Your season of being underestimated has expired. Your season of being ignored is over, because the blessing written in your name has already begun its journey toward you. My child, now that the shadows of the past have been uncovered, you must prepare your heart for what I'm about to reveal next, because everything you have heard until now, the stormy night, your father's courage, the benefactor's search, the hidden betrayal, the inheritance written in your name, all of it is only the beginning of the real truth. There is a deeper layer beneath everything, a secret that even the benefactor himself only discovered in the last phase of his life, a truth so unexpected, so intertwined with your destiny, that once you hear it, every confusion in your heart will quiet down. My child, listen carefully. When the benefactor finally located your name and traced your family records, he didn't stop there. There was something inside him, something like a quiet voice, a pull that urged him to search more deeply. Something told him that there was more to your identity than just your father's bravery. So he began reading through old documents tied to your father's work, papers your father wrote, notes he kept hidden, places he visited secretly, people he protected, missions he never spoke of. And the more he read, the more he realized that your father was not living an ordinary life. Your father carried a burden he never shared, a calling he never talked about, a responsibility he kept hidden from even those closest to him. He wasn't just a man who saved a stranger one rainy night. Your father was known as the kind of person who rarely ignored someone in trouble. He carried a deep sense of responsibility for the people around him, often stepping into difficult situations when others chose to walk away. Friends and strangers alike remembered him as someone unusually aware of his surroundings, someone who noticed tension before it escalated, and who trusted the quiet feeling that told him when something was wrong. Over time, those close to him began noticing the personal reflections he left behind in notebooks, letters, and unfinished thoughts, where he tried to describe experiences he could not fully explain. He wrote about moments when an unexpected feeling urged him to pause before making a decision, to take another route home, or to remain near someone who seemed to need help even before danger became visible. To him, these moments felt less like coincidence and more like a calm inner certainty guiding his actions. He never described it as fear or superstition, but rather as a quiet awareness that seemed to arrive without warning and without explanation. At first, the benefactor who later discovered these writings believed they were simply thoughtful reflections from a compassionate man trying to make sense of life's unpredictability. But as he continued reading and began tracing the events connected to your father's actions, the details started forming a larger picture that was impossible for him to ignore. The timing of certain decisions, the places your father chose to be, and the lives affected by those choices all seemed connected by something deeper than chance alone. What moved the benefactor most was not the idea of mystery itself, but the realization that your father consistently chose courage when it would have been easier to remain uninvolved. Whether guided by instinct, faith, conscience, or an unshakable sense of purpose, he acted when others hesitated, and because of that, lives were changed in ways that continued long after those moments had passed. Your father survived that night because he was covered in something greater than strength alone. Your father had something that few people carry, a spiritual mantle, a divine sensitivity, a destiny written long before he was born. And my child, that mantle didn't die with your father. That calling did not end with him. It passed down, quietly, silently, but surely, and it rests on you. This is why the benefactor felt overwhelmed the first time he saw your photograph. He couldn't explain it, he didn't understand it, but he sensed something, a familiarity in your eyes, a strength in your posture, a fire in your presence that reminded him of your father. He once told his lawyer, "When I look into this child's eyes, I feel the same presence I felt in the storm, the same assurance that someone is watching over them." My child, that wasn't imagination. That wasn't memory. That wasn't wishful thinking. That was spiritual recognition. Because the same covering that protected your father, the same intuition that guided him, The same courage that rose inside him, the same divine protection that surrounded him, lives inside you. And the benefactor sensed it long before he had any proof. But there's something even more astonishing. The night before he signed all his wealth to you, he had a dream so vivid, it woke him up trembling. A dream he told no one about, except for the letter he left you. In that dream, he said he saw your father, standing in a field, not in pain, not wounded, but strong, tall, peaceful, and radiant, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from him. Your father didn't speak, but he pointed toward a rising light, a light that grew brighter with every passing moment, a light that revealed a road stretching far into the distance. And on that road, the benefactor saw you, walking forward, alone at first, but covered by a glow he couldn't describe. Your father placed his hand over his heart, then extended it toward you, as if saying, "This is the one. This is the child who will continue what I could not finish." When the benefactor woke up, he was shaking. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. But he knew one thing. His entire legacy belonged to you. Not out of debt anymore. Not out of guilt. Not even out of gratitude. But because he realized, your destiny is bigger than anything he ever imagined. Bigger than the inheritance. Bigger than the wealth. Bigger than the betrayal. Bigger than the past. And he knew this truth. If your father protected him 40 years ago, you will protect what your father once stood for. That's why he arranged everything with the utmost secrecy. That's why no one else was told. That's why all documents were sealed until his passing. That's why your name was placed discreetly, safely, quietly in his final papers. Because he understood that the same darkness that chased him long ago still exists today, in different forms, with different faces, but the same malice. And he wanted to ensure you received the blessing without interference. There is always a moment when hidden tensions finally rise to the surface, when people who stayed quiet for years begin revealing what was buried beneath pride, resentment, and unfinished history. What you are facing now is not simply about wealth, recognition, or inheritance the way outsiders might assume. The emotions surrounding this situation reach much further back than anyone first realized, tied to old wounds, broken trust, and decisions that shaped entire lives long before you entered the picture. The person watching from a distance carries bitterness that has been growing for years, fed by the belief that something valuable was taken from them or promised to them by expectation alone. When they heard your name connected to the benefactor, it awakened frustration they thought had been settled long ago. But the truth is, your father's actions changed the course of more lives than you were ever told. He stepped in during moments where silence would have been easier, and because of that, he earned both respect and enemies without always speaking about either one. He protected people quietly, without asking for recognition, and some individuals never forgave him for standing in the way of plans built on selfishness and manipulation. Over time, those old resentments passed from one generation to the next, turning into stories shaped more by anger than truth. The descendant, now chasing control, believed everything would eventually fall into their hands naturally, convinced that power and influence belonged to them by right. They built expectations around an outcome they never truly earned, and when reality moved in another direction, they interpreted it as betrayal instead of consequence. But life does not always reward entitlement, and destiny rarely follows the path people try to force upon it. What unsettles them most is not the loss of wealth itself, but the realization that the future they imagined can no longer be controlled the way they once believed it could. And when they saw your name, on the documents, their world shattered, because your father was the one man their family feared, the one man who exposed their intentions, the one man who stood in their way, the one man whose courage disrupted their generations of manipulation. And now, his child, you, is receiving the prize they always wanted to steal. This is why they are watching you, not because they can stop destiny, but because they are terrified of what you will become when you receive what belongs to you. They sense something about you too, something they don't want to admit. They sense the same strength your father carried, the same resilience, the same spiritual protection, the same clarity, the same determination, the same ability to see through lies and deception. They see it, they recognize it, and that is why they fear you. But do not worry, my child. You are not facing this alone. You are not walking blind. You are not stepping into unknown territory unprotected, because the benefactor did not only leave you wealth, he left you instructions, guidance, documents, keys, clues, a roadmap to navigate exactly what lies ahead. And now, the moment has come for you to understand the final connection, the truth that ties your father, the benefactor, the betrayal, and your destiny into one story. A truth so powerful, so shocking, so deeply connected to who you truly are, that once you hear it, the meaning of everything will change. My child, now that everything has been revealed, listen closely to this last truth, because it brings every piece of the story together. The man who left you his entire fortune did not simply act out of memory, he acted out of revelation. In his final days, he finally understood that what happened 39 years ago was not an accident. It was a divine intersection. Your father was placed on that road for a reason. He was guided into that storm for a purpose. He became a shield for a man whose future was meant to cross yours. And when the benefactor realized that his survival, his success, and his entire destiny existed only because your father stood in the gap that night, he made one final decision. If his courage gave me life, then my legacy will give life to his child. That's why every asset now carries your name. That's why every document honors you. That's why every lawyer was instructed to protect you. That's why every possible obstacle was removed before the will was revealed. Because in his heart, he knew you are the rightful heir to what your father's bravery created, and the person who has been watching you, the descendant of the original betrayer, they are powerless. They cannot change destiny. But when you look at things more closely, what usually shapes a person's path is far more human and grounded than that. The idea that you were, quote, chosen or singled out by destiny can feel powerful in moments of uncertainty, especially when you're trying to make sense of struggle or searching for reassurance that your experiences have meaning. In reality, what often carries someone forward is not a sealed promise from fate, but the slow accumulation of decisions, relationships, effort, and timing that intersect in ways no one fully controls. If your family's history includes courage, sacrifice, or difficult choices, those things can absolutely influence the opportunities you encounter later, but not as a guaranteed inheritance or a fixed outcome that arrives on its own. More often, they shape the values you carry, the doors you're willing to walk through, and the resilience you have built along the way. It can feel comforting to imagine that a hidden benefactor, a perfect moment, or an unavoidable, coming blessing is already on its way, but life doesn't tend to operate in that predetermined manner. What does happen, though, is that effort and patience sometimes converge into opportunities that feel significant when they finally appear, and in hindsight, they can seem almost destined. The important thing is not to wait passively for something external to arrive and resolve everything, but to stay engaged with the choices in front of you now. Meaningful change usually comes from what you consistently do with the time and resources you already have, even if it doesn't look dramatic in the moment. Rather than a guaranteed transfer or unavoidable breakthrough, what you can trust more reliably is your ability to respond, adapt, and build forward from where you are. That is where real momentum forms, not in promises of certainty, but in the steady shaping of your own direction over time.